On a related note, in June, as part of Meeting Place's three-part series on feeding the world, we mentioned that in rapidly developing countries such as China, where a small but growing segment of the population is becoming middle class and affluent, food expenditures have become not about food quantity, but about higher quality foods, such as meals that are both more convenient and healthier. How does the industry prepare to meet the increasing demands of these extremes between the impoverished masses and the increasingly growing middle class?
Well, this is an issue, I think, that both the governments of developing countries as well as the industry itself, the international food industry, is addressing. Many of the large food companies, for example, now have product development and research and development branches in China and other Asian countries, as well as other parts of the world, because the need to develop processes and products for this particular market is now very, very large, and the profits to be made are there as well. So what's happening in many of these countries now are very serious changes in their food system, and how they develop food products, and how they process food products, and how they distribute food products. And many of the food companies now have very, very substantial presence in those areas.
Now, post-packaging pasteurization has shown a lot of promise in the last few years, but it still isn't very widely used, likely due to cost and footprint. I assume that for large processors, it's an easier decision to make to implement post-packaging kill steps. But what about small and mid-sized processors?
I would say this depends on the type of post-package pasteurization. There's a lot of different types of post-package pasteurization. If we're talking of thermal treatments, for example, just a straightforward heat pasteurization, yes, the larger size facilities may have an efficiency better than the smaller size facilities, but it can be done with smaller processors and smaller sites. If we're talking about other types of post-process pasteurization, such as the high pressure processing, or some of the more sophisticated techniques that we have, I'm afraid the cost, the upfront cost of getting the equipment and creating the system, it's probably too large for smaller size and mid-sized processors to handle, whereas a larger processor might be able to effectively absorb that upfront cost and distribute it to the large number of units that will be produced.
Okay, now getting back for a minute to bio-based materials, consumer demand for more biodegradable or recyclable materials. You mentioned that some materials are wood-based and organics-based. What, as far as research and development stage, where are we at that point, and how far from commercialization are we?
We actually have several polymeric materials that are derived from renewable resources that are actually in the marketplace right now. Polylactic acid is a polymer that looks like plastic, and it's been used in several applications already. So in terms of where we are, some of the efforts have actually produced packages that are in the market right now. Many of the, or some, I wouldn't say many, but some of the bottles we use today for, let's say, water bottling are actually bio-based plastics or bio-based materials.
Okay.
However, to get to the point where we can completely replace plastics in all of their applications, we're very far from that.
And getting back to the issue of developing countries and the fact that half the food produced there is never eaten because it spoils, you've mentioned food processing should probably be done on site. How can you talk about that a little bit more, about how that can be implemented on a reasonably acceptable financial scale for some of these developing countries?
Yeah, I think what we need to do there is we need to better study and understand the specific issues in specific locations. There will be different solutions for different areas with different products. In some areas, for example, the products may need to be dried, and some efficient way of sun drying may be the way to go, which is not energy demanding, and it already uses the natural energy of the sun to dry the products. But it needs to happen in a way that the product doesn't spoil. In other cases, we may have to develop specific equipment for that particular application in that particular location. A very small piece of equipment, for example, that may create a small product from, let's say, the powder or the flour that they produce from whatever source of starch they have, so that instead of having the flour, now they have a product that can be consumed. In other cases, it may be smaller versions of existing large piece of equipment that we use in the very large processing facilities that we have today, and that's basically a miniaturization of what we already have.